In the summer of 1997, a wedding singer named Nora drove beyond the edge of Kuwait City for a private performance. Past the water tower, past the farms, into sand that seemed to hum beneath her tires, she followed an invitation written in perfect classical Arabic, but signed by no one. By midnight she would sing for hundreds of guests who did not breathe. Blink or cast shadows, when dawn came, the mansion was gone. Police found only tire marks ending in the desert. Some call it a legend, others a warning. Tonight, we reopen the case of the spirit's wedding, where music met something older than humanity. This is Forbidden's archive. Before the night that changed everything, Nora was known across Kuwait for her voice, strong, steady, and unshaken by nerves or noise. She wasn't a pop star, but in wedding halls from Hawali to Jara, her name carried weight. Brides trusted her to keep celebrations running on rhythm and elegance. By 1997, she led her own band, 4 women and 1 sound technician, performing traditional Khaliji songs that blended poetry and percussion. For them, music was ritual, precision, and pride. The summer heat was relentless that year. Nights were heavy with desert dust, and the electricity often flickered under the strain of air conditioners. Nora returned home late from a Thursday wedding, makeup fading, throat dry from hours of singing. That's when her phone rang. The voice on the line spoke in formal Arabic, the kind you hear in old sermons or historic radio plays. Polite, distant, he introduced himself only as Abdullah, saying his daughter was to be married in 3 weeks. He offered double her usual rate and half the payment up front. The only detail that unsettled her was his address, past the 6th Ring Road. He said, "Beyond the farms. You'll be met by our driver at the water tower." Nora hesitated. She'd played rural weddings before, big families with old estates, but this one sounded unusually secretive. Still, professionalism won over instinct. She wrote the date in her notebook and accepted. 2 days later, an unmarked envelope arrived under her door. Inside, crisp Kuwaiti dinar bills and a folded note that simply read, "For the music, may your voice bring joy to our home." Nora stared at the handwriting for a long time. It was elegant, ancient, like the letters you find carved into stone. She placed it back in the envelope and told herself it was nothing. But that night, when she went to sleep, she dreamed of a mansion glowing in the desert, its windows full of silent guests. The evening of the wedding came wrapped in silence. Even the usual city noise, car horns, stray radios, laughter from balconies, felt distant that night. Nora stood by the window, veil draped over her shoulder, watching the last light bleed out of the sky. By 7, her band arrived. Layla, Mayam, Fatima, Sarah, and Hassan, their quiet technician. They joked softly as they carried the oud drums and microphones down the narrow stairwell. But their laughter sounded thinner than usual. Outside, the air was molten, the kind of heat that hums in your ears. They loaded the Land Cruiser and pickup, double-checked every cable, and began the drive north as the city receded. The world flattened into dunes and faint lines of electric poles. The further they drove, the fewer lights remained. It felt as if they were driving into the edge of a dream. At the 6th Ring Road, they stopped for fuel. The attendant stared when Nora gave the address. "Past the farms?" He repeated, uneasy. "There's nothing out there. She smiled, trying to sound casual. "A private estate." He nodded, but didn't reply. 20 minutes later, they saw the water tower, a pale monolith in the half-light. Standing alone against the sand, a black Mercedes idled beside it. The driver stepped out, face hidden by his gutra. Without a word, he gestured for them to follow. The asphalt ended. Tires whispered against sand, the radio died to static. Only the hum of the engines filled the night. When the mansion appeared, it was like a mirage sharpening into focus, vast, illuminated, impossibly detailed. "Looks new," Hassan whispered. "No," Layla murmured. "It looks remembered." Every window was lit, every shadow fixed in place, as if the house had been waiting for them all along. Midnight was still an hour away when Nora's band began their final sound check. The courtyard shimmered under strings of lanterns, the air thick with bakur smoke. Every wall of the mansion glowed faintly, as though lit from within. Then the guests began to appear. They didn't arrive through doors or gates. They simply were there. First a handful of women in jeweled veils, then clusters of men in spotless white, moving in silence. One moment the courtyard was empty. The next it was full. Nora greeted them with the traditional welcome song. Her voice carried clean and bright through the heat, echoing against the stone. The crowd responded with high, trilling cheers that seemed to come from every direction at once. As she sang, she noticed the pattern of their dancing, not chaotic, but perfectly synchronized, the same steps repeating again and again. Hands rose together, turned together, fell together. Her bandmates felt it too. Lila's oud drifted slightly off-key. Fatima's breathing grew shallow. Hassan at the mixer watched the levels spike, even though none of them had touched the controls. Nora forced her rhythm steady. Professional instinct. Keep playing. Don't stop. The air vibrated. Each verse echoed back half a second late, like the mansion itself was singing with them. When the final note of the third song faded, the crowd froze in place, hundreds of figures motionless under the lanterns. Then, without warning, they erupted into applause so loud it rattled the instruments. Nora bowed automatically. A veiled woman approached the stage, placed a handful of gold coins at Nora's feet, and whispered, "The bride will join you soon." Her voice was warm, but it carried no breath. The applause faded, and for a few seconds there was only the hum of the amplifiers. Then the air changed. Nora could feel it, a heaviness pressing behind her ribs. The way the atmosphere feels before a storm. Every lantern flickered once, as if the night had taken a breath. The crowd parted without sound. A path opened through the dancers. Straight toward the stage, the woman in black reappeared, gliding rather than walking. Behind her came the bride. She wore gold from head to toe, bracelets, anklets, veil, but the fabric of her gown shifted color with every step. Like moonlight through water, her face was hidden. Nora began another song automatically, voice trembling on the first note. The bride stopped halfway across the courtyard and lifted her veil. What Nora saw wasn't monstrous. It was almost beautiful. A face so pale it seemed carved from marble, eyes too dark to catch the lantern light. But there was no reflection in those eyes, only depth. The bride smiled and began to move, her steps gliding in rhythm with the song. Every guest turned with her, mirroring each gesture perfectly. The dance became a loop, graceful, impossible, endless. The longer Nora sang, the slower time felt. She saw sweat bead on her bandmates' faces, but none of them dared stop. Then, at what felt like the final note, the bride paused. She looked directly at Nora and placed her hand over her heart. The gesture was thank you, blessing, and warning all at once. The lights dimmed. When they rose again, the bride and the woman in black were gone. The music still echoed, but there was no one left to hear it. For a few seconds after the lights returned, no one moved. The courtyard was empty. The air felt vacuumed of sound, as though the night itself had been erased. Nora lowered her microphone. Its cable lay coiled like a snake at her feet. Her bandmates stood frozen, eyes fixed on the place where the bride had been. The lanterns flickered once, then steadied. There was no wind, no trace of footprints on the sand. Only the scent of burnt incense, heavy and metallic. "Let's go," Layla whispered. They gathered their things without speaking, moving like people underwater. When Hassan turned to unplug the soundboard, the speakers hissed even though the power was off. A low note hung in the air, almost like a voice holding its breath. Outside, the desert was darker than it had been hours earlier. Their headlights struggled to cut through the haze. Nora felt the silence following them, not behind, but around, like a pressure in her ears. It didn't speak until the water tower reappeared, pale against the dawn. When they reached the first petrol station, the attendant blinked at them in confusion. He said no one had passed his way all night. Back home, Nora tried to explain it away. Heat, exhaustion, the power of suggestion. But when she opened her handbag, she found a gold coin resting on top of her makeup pouch. It was warm to the touch. The next morning she called the number from the note. The line was dead. She tried again. Nothing. That evening she dialed once more and heard something on the other end. A faint hum. Like music played underwater. Nora never performed again. The rest of the band disbanded within months. When asked why, they all gave the same answer. The music changed. Years later, when people spoke about Nora, they called her the singer who disappeared without vanishing. She still lived in Kuwait City, but her world had grown smaller. A single apartment, a garden, and a silence she never broke with song. Neighbors said they sometimes heard her humming before dawn, quiet as breath. Always the same melody, the one she sang at that last wedding. In interviews, her former bandmates avoided the subject. Some said they remembered nothing. Others claimed they dreamed of the mansion's courtyard, the smell of incense, the endless dance, as if memory had become a ritual they couldn't escape. One reporter tracked down a file in the municipal archives, a blueprint of an old estate outside Jara, burned in 1987 after a lightning strike. The structure matched the one Nora described exactly. Folklore scholars later compared her account with old Bedouin stories, tales of Al-Afra al-Jinn, the weddings of the unseen. They said musicians were sometimes summoned to play at those celebrations, and, if they performed without fear or returned unharmed. Nora never confirmed that story. When asked what she believed happened, she only said, "Music crosses worlds. Some places it shouldn't." The coin she kept until her death, framed untouched, still faintly warm to the touch decades later. Today, musicians in Kuwait tell her story like a cautionary legend. Never accept a booking beyond the 6th Ring Road. Never sing where no echo returns. and if the guests never blink, finish the song. Then leave before dawn, some say on certain summer nights. If the wind carries the right tune, you can still hear a voice echoing through the dunes, singing for a wedding that no longer exists. If you thought the horror ended here, you're wrong. What other dark rituals and forbidden practices are still being performed in secret? Dive deeper into the chilling world of haunted ceremonies, banned footage, and eerie folklore that refuses to stay buried. Click on the playlist to uncover terrifying recordings, lost evidence, and disturbing stories they never wanted you to see. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for weekly uploads of spine-tingling footage and dark tales that echo from the shadows. This is the Forbiddance Archive, where the hidden truth and haunting evidence come to life.